It was supposed to be just another interview. A promotional stop for his latest film. The usual polite smiles, rehearsed answers, and flashes from photographers. But when Jamie Dornan sat down that afternoon, something felt different. The questions were softer, more personal, and for once, he didn't hide behind the polished charm the world knew so well. Then came the one question that stopped the room cold. Would you ever get back together with Amelia? Jamie hesitated. The air hung heavy. And then, with quiet finality, he said the words that rippled across the internet within minutes. I'll never get back with Amelia Warner. No anger, no bitterness, just truth, raw, unfiltered, and heartbreakingly calm. Within hours, headlines exploded. Jamie Dornan shuts down reunion rumors. The actor finally breaks his silence on Amelia. Fans were stunned. For years, people had secretly hoped that Jamie and Amelia, the once golden couple, might find their way back to each other. After all, they had been the picture of stability in a world that devours love stories and spits out broken pieces. But now, that illusion was gone. Jamie had always been careful with his words. He didn't feed gossip, didn't play into speculation. Yet this time, his voice carried a weight that even the most cynical reporters couldn't ignore. Sitting back in his chair, he added softly, "Some things end for a reason. You can love someone deeply and still know you can't go back." That line hit differently. It wasn't a celebrity statement, it was a confession. To understand the gravity of those words, you have to remember where they started. Jamie and Amelia's story had been the kind of love the industry rarely sees, quiet, grounded, and built far from the cameras. She was his piece, the woman who made him believe that fame didn't have to change everything. Together, they built a family, 3 beautiful daughters, a home filled with laughter and lullabies. But over time, the laughter grew quieter. The long shoots, the red carpets, the constant scrutiny, they created a distance no amount of affection could fill. Jamie once said that acting can be both a gift and a curse. You live other people's emotions for months, he explained, and sometimes, you forget how to feel your own. Amelia felt it too. She watched the man she loved drift between realities, one foot in Hollywood, the other struggling to stay grounded at home. It wasn't infidelity or betrayal. It was something simpler, sadder. A slow unraveling of 2 souls who loved each other but no longer fit together. Still, they tried. They attended events hand in hand, smiled for cameras, whispered reassurances behind closed doors. But there's a silence that grows between 2 people when the love remains, yet the connection fades. Jamie once described it as being in the same room but miles apart. So when they finally separated, it wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors or harsh words. Just a shared understanding, and heartbreak that neither dared to show. For years afterward, Jamie stayed silent about it. Even as rumors swirled about his friendship with Dakota Johnson or speculation about his emotional state, he kept Amelia's name off the record. Respect, he said, was the least he could give the mother of his children. That's why his declaration hit so hard. It wasn't just an update about a past relationship. It was closure. The kind that hurts precisely because it's peaceful. After the interview aired, clips flooded social media. Fans dissected every word, every glance. Some called it cold. Others saw the pain behind his composure. One user wrote, "You can see it in his eyes. He's not angry. He's just done." Later that evening, paparazzi caught Jamie leaving the studio alone. Head down, coat collar pulled high. There was no entourage, no pretense. Just a man who had finally said out loud what he'd probably known for years. Friends close to him told the press that the words came after months of reflection. "He's not bitter," one of them said. "He just knows that trying again would mean reopening a wound that took years to heal." And maybe that's why his answer carried such quiet strength. Because it wasn't about rejection. It was about acceptance. Jamie had loved Amelia Warner. He probably always would, but he'd reached a place where nostalgia couldn't compete with reality. The chapter had closed, and he was finally brave enough to admit it. As the clip continued to circulate, One moment stood out, a small, almost imperceptible smile at the end of the interview. Not the charming grin of a movie star, but the weary, peaceful smile of a man who had made peace with his past. And though he never said it directly, his eyes seemed to tell the rest of the story. He didn't hate her. He didn't wish things were different. He just knew that love, no matter how deep, sometimes belongs to a time you can't return to. The days following Jamie Dornan's shocking statement were a blur of noise, flashing headlines, endless speculation, and fans demanding to know why. Why would a man who once called Amelia Warner, the love of my life, speak with such finality? But behind that quiet, heartbreaking sentence lay years of reflection, regret, and acceptance, truths too personal to fit in a soundbite. In another interview, filmed weeks later, Jamie finally opened up. Not as a movie star, not as the charming figure the world had fallen for, but as a man trying to make sense of his past. The interviewer leaned forward and asked gently, "You said you'll never get back with Amelia. What did you mean by that?" Jamie exhaled slowly. "I meant what I said," he replied. "I'll always have love for her. She's the mother of my kids, and she's an incredible person. But, sometimes love changes shape. It doesn't die, it just stops being something you can live inside." The words were soft but heavy. You could feel that he wasn't speaking from bitterness, but from experience, the kind that leaves scars even when the wound has healed. He explained that after the separation, he tried for a long time to imagine what going back would even look like. But each time, he realized it would mean returning to versions of themselves that no longer existed. "We were young when we met," he said quietly. "We grew, and we grew apart. That doesn't make anyone the villain. It just makes us human." It wasn't that he stopped loving her. In fact, he admitted that love was exactly why it hurt so much to let go. "I think part of maturity is realizing that holding on to something that's no longer right can destroy what was once beautiful. And I couldn't do that. Not to her, not to myself, not to our girls." He paused then, eyes downcast, before adding the line that would be replayed across social media for days. "You can't heal if you keep reopening the same wound." The audience in the studio fell silent. It wasn't just another celebrity confession, it was universal. Everyone in the room seemed to understand that kind of pain. The kind where love is still there, but time refuses to stand still for it. Jamie went on to describe how, after the split, he had to rebuild himself piece by piece. He threw himself into his work, not as an escape, but as a way to remember who he was outside of marriage, outside of fatherhood, outside of public expectations. He learned how to live alone again, how to make peace with silence, how to stop checking his phone for a message that would never come. In private moments, though, the memories still surfaced. The smell of Amelia's perfume on an old sweater. The sound of her laughter echoing in the house they once shared. Sometimes, he admitted, he'd hear one of her songs and feel an ache so deep it almost made him reach out. But then he'd stop, not because he didn't care, but because he finally understood that missing someone doesn't mean you should return to them. "People think love ends when you separate," he said. "It doesn't, it changes form. I still carry her kindness, her humor, the lessons she taught me. But love isn't always about being together. Sometimes it's about letting the other person find happiness, even if it's without you." When the interviewer asked him if he believed in second chances, Jamie smiled faintly. "I do," he said. "But not all stories are meant to have sequels. Some are perfect in their ending, painful, but honest." That honesty became the heart of his message. Fans, once desperate for a reunion, began to see something deeper in his words. A reminder that closure can be beautiful, even when it breaks you. In the months that followed, Jamie appeared more grounded, more at peace. He focused on his daughters, his work, and the quiet corners of life that fame can't touch. Friends said he laughed more easily now, even if there was still a trace of melancholy behind his eyes. As for Amelia, she, too, seemed to find her own calm, often photographed smiling with her children, writing music again, living softly beyond the noise. Though they rarely spoke publicly about each other, their mutual respect was unmistakable. Jamie once summarized it best in a quote that fans have since immortalized online. "The greatest act of love I ever gave Amelia was letting her go before we started resenting each other." It's not the ending people expected, but maybe it was the one both of them needed. Because love, as Jamie learned, isn't always about holding on. Sometimes, it's about the courage to close a chapter with grace, to look back without bitterness and move forward without fear. And for him, that was the real reason he would never go back. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but because, in his own quiet way, Jamie Dornan had already said the most honest goodbye of his life.